Well, everything is because of social mores. So the wrong reasons are because of social mores. We've we've been socialized to think about behaviors like exercising. And I'm happy to talk about eating too, but just for the sake of having the same behavioral protagonist in this story, I'm going to use exercise. Okay. Um, we've been taught to think about exercising as medicine. In fact, I'm sure you know there is a global campaign that I think originally came out of the American College of Sports Medicine called Exercise is Medicine. And the goal of this campaign explicitly was to get clinicians to value prescribing exercise. But the problem with promoting exercise either to, well, mostly to people as medicine is because statistics show that people don't even take the original medicine, which is their pill. So why would we make an analogy for exercise that's a failure before it even begins, right? So
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me on the podcast today. And might I say, you're the author of The Joy Choice, which was named as one of the best health books in 2022 by the Washington Post, no less. So, Dr. Michelle Segar, thank you for coming onto the podcast. You have been researching behavior change in terms of health, eating and exercise for the best part of, 3 decades at this stage. But can I take you way back to when you first garnered interest in this area? I believe you were doing a master's, was it in kinesiology at the time, and you were looking at how exercise affects depressive and anxiety symptoms in cancer survivors. Can you tell me a little bit about that and then how that piqued your interest in this area?
yes, thank you. What a perfect lead into the story. I was getting my first master's degree in kinesiology. I started that degree in 93. And our study design was to randomize people to one group got exercise, the other group was a control group. And they exercised. We took the measures baseline before they started and the post program after they were done. And we found what we hypothesized, that the group that exercised did improve in depression and anxiety compared to the control group. And one thing that's important to say about the survivor group is that on average, they were about 4.5 years after they had finished treatment. So they were not kind of active patients for the most part. But part of our study design was to call people back almost 3 months after the study had ended and do focus groups to collect qualitative data. And I remember the participants sitting around their tables, smiling, talking about exercise. So you can imagine how surprised I was when I found out that almost everyone had stopped exercising when our study had ended. And, you know, as a mid-20 something at the point, I was flabbergasted. And I thought, and I asked them, why did you stop exercising? And they said, oh, I'm so busy. I have this, that, and the other. I have kids to take care of. I have work. I have a job I have to go to. I have aging parents. I don't have time to exercise. And what became clear to me was that these survivors had not stopped exercising because they had survived cancer. They had stopped exercising because they were simply busy adults living their lives. And, you know, I thought if people who had faced a life-threatening illness didn't have the requisite mindset and skill set to sustain a self-care behavior like exercise, then we have a real problem in society. And you know, when I had that insight, I literally, like, I remember almost 30 years ago, February 2024, it'll be 30 years, a light bulb went off. And I said to myself, this is my problem and I'm going to solve it. And so, you know, that got me to go in and get a second master's degree to learn how to develop develop and evaluate behavior change curriculum and programming. And then I launched a program in the community as a business. And then after a couple years of doing that, I decided I needed to become an expert on the psyche, you know, what's really going on deep down unconsciously that's related to this topic of sustainable behavior change. And so I got a PhD focused on sustainable physical activity behavior. So I want to say, while I've done some research around eating, and the Joy Choice does talk about eating, my core expertise is in sustainable physical activity, motivation, and behavior.
Well, this is so important, and this is the reason why I want to have you on, because we're recording this now at the end of November. We're coming up to December, a new year, and we know that means New Year's resolutions, people adopting new habits, new behaviors. They hit a fitness buzz, they start eating healthily, and then very quickly, when we get into February and in March, all of those behaviors then go out the window. So this is why I wanted to have you on today, because I think your observations and the research that you've done over the last 30 years might be of value to people who are looking to make a sustainable change over the new year.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's really what my work is about, is how do you prevent that from happening? How do you, how can you go into a new behavior change and avoid that fallout? And the thing that's important for listeners to, I mean, they know already, but it's just important to say that, virtually everyone who makes resolutions, you know, discontinue them very quickly. I mean, it's often as quick as 2 or 3 weeks. So it's a very common phenomenon. And, I believe the reason why this occurs is because people initiate a behavior change in a paradigm that sets them up to fail. And it's not their fault. It's the paradigm we've learned in society.
And is this because of social mores, or is it because their motivations are the wrong motivations? Is it a comparative thing where people are looking at other people, for example, on Instagram, thinking, I want to be like them, I'll adopt this behavior change for the wrong motivations, the wrong reasons?
It's, well, everything is because of social mores. So the wrong reasons are because of social mores. We've we've been socialized to think about behaviors like exercising. And I'm happy to talk about eating too, but just for the sake of having the same behavioral protagonist in this story, I'm going to use exercise. Okay. We've been taught to think about exercising as a vehicle to as medicine. In fact, I'm sure there is a global campaign that I think originally came out of the American College of Sports Medicine called Exercise is Medicine. And the goal of this campaign explicitly was to get clinicians to value prescribing exercise. But the problem with promoting exercise either mostly to people as medicine, is because statistics show that people don't even take the original medicine, which is their pill. So why would we make an analogy for exercise that's a failure before it even begins, right? So exercise has been medicalized. It's been framed as a behavior that's going to help most people slim down and shape their bodies and get fit. And the reality is that it won't do that for most people. What it does amazing for most people is it boosts mood, it generates energy, it enhances well-being, it helps us feel our best. And of course, when we have all of those things, then we're that much more able to eat in ways that we truly want to eat, to get better sleep, to be patient with our children and not snap at our partners, right?
Well, one of the early chapters in your book, The Joy Choice, it is entitled The Power of Habits. Is it all it's cracked up to be when it comes to healthy eating and exercise? Well, is it all it's cracked up to be?
No, not for complex health behaviors. So habits, now there's a couple of things that we have to clarify first. So let's define what we're talking about. The word habit is used in the vernacular as referring to doing something consistently and regularly. And, that is certainly one way of defining it. And before I tell you why I think even that might be problematic, I want to talk about the other definition of habit, which refers to habit formation or an automatic habit, something, a choice, a decision, a behavior we enact unconsciously, automatically, without thought, because it's our brain has learned associations between a cue like brushing and flossing, or brushing, and then the behavior is flossing. And for simple behaviors, although even the research hasn't panned out for sustainability, habit formation, the fact that we can form an automatic habit, cue, brushing, behavior, flossing, reward. I feel a sense of satisfaction. I have a clean mouth. My brain learns that association. I don't have to think about flossing. I put my toothbrush down and I immediately reach for the floss. It's easy to see how that type of simple behavior could form an automatic habit in that loop, that three-step loop. But let's consider the context. You're in the bathroom. There's not Netflix there for most of us. There's not pets that need our attention for the most part. There's not screaming kids. So it's a loop. It's a process that doesn't really have a lot of room for disruption, because that's what it takes to form a habit. It takes something that goes again and again and again so that our brain has to learn it. But let's think about walking outside of the bathroom into our hectic, complex lives, where we get unexpected projects at work dumped on our laps and unanticipated calls that our kids are sick from school and we have to pick them up right when we were about to go to the gym or take that walk outside. There are so many things that are unexpected. And if you think about how habits are formed in this very simplistic loop, for a behavior like flossing that's associated with a simple behavior like brushing your teeth. But let's talk about exercise. While you may have to plan it, you may have to change your clothes, there might have to be transportation, you might have to deal with a lack of motivation or feeling disdain for what you're going to do. There are all these forces and factors that habit loop just has no chance of surviving. And so when it comes to complexity, the habit formation is not a viable option for most people. Now, you read my book, so the caveat here is some people are different and it works for some people. And as you know, I playfully came up with the term habiters and unhabiters, and my husband is a habiter. He has an exercise habit. He sets his alarm at 5 a.m. when no one's going to bug him. He gets up and does his exercise. There's nothing to disrupt that. He's also an incredibly disciplined, organized person who gets done what he says he's going to get done. So there is a personality element to this. But when we step aside from super disciplined people and we just kind of go into the roles that so many people have where they're managing. You're not just managing your own life and the unanticipated that comes to each of us every day, but if we're managing the lives of our pets and our children and helping our parents, that's an exponential amount of unanticipated chaos in our life. How on earth are habits going to form for exercise? So I'll stop there to see if you have any questions.
No, I smiled when I learned about the term habiter, because you had spoken before about your husband eating the same thing every day, and I'm probably one of those people, because I am a person of habit. But just to come back to your issue with habit formation, certainly for some people, is this why then you wrote a paper last year? It's entitled "It's Time to Unhabit and Think Critically About Whether Habit Formation Has Been Overvalued as a Behavior Change Strategy Within Health Promotion." Was that your motivation for writing that? Yeah,
absolutely. Because my work as a scientist has been to bring a critical perspective to everything I learn, and critically thinking about theories. There have been very popular theories that you may or not, I don't know how deep into the scientific literature, you dive, but there's something called the stages of change. and the trans-theoretical model. And, a lot of theories that have been very popular over the years that a lot of scientists and practitioners have learned, that the research doesn't support really fit a lot of things. So, for example, I learned about the stages of change when I was getting my master's in public health. And immediately I knew that was not the theory that was going to help me solve the problem I was trying to do. So my strategy, if you will, as a behavioral scientist has been to think critically about what I'm being taught and wonder, now, how does this relate to complex behaviors like exercise? And so over the years, I've become very concerned that all of the research and best-selling books on habits are really misguiding most people away from success.
And
And
is
that's
that
why I've written about it.
and is that because they never take into consideration the complexity and the messiness of a real world situation?
Well, it's not that they don't take into consideration. It's that a lot of people, and I have my own biases about things, and I'm very open about them. But a lot of times when someone's a scientist, for example, or an author is studying a topic, they get very we fall in love with our ideas and our paradigms and our strategies. And all the books that I know of on habits basically tell stories about successful habit formation across organizations, across developing worlds and hand washing, across exercise, across all these different types of behaviors. And it makes it sound so simple and common sense. And that's where the problem is, because a behavior like exercise is so unique and has such nuance that people are overgeneralizing the value of, for example, forming a habit for flossing your teeth or putting your keys down in the same place, things that don't have a lot of disruption with these complex behaviors. Again, my husband has a habit. He sleeps in his exercise clothes. That's part of how he reduces friction away from from disrupting his habit. And by the way, I have his permission to say that, so I'm not saying anything naughty. It's because habit formation is untenable. It's untenable for most people because our lives simply cannot support the consistent, uninterrupted needs of doing the same thing at the same time in the same way, which is what habit formation aims for. Now, I'm not saying, let me just say one thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't plan things. Planning, here's my perfect strategy. Let's keep habit formation for the things that it's going to help with. And I try to wash the dishes right after I'm done eating. I'm trying to form a habit. Because really, except for my not wanting to wash the dishes, there isn't really anything to disrupt me from that task. But don't ask me to try to form a habit to exercise, because I've got too many other things. I have to vary what I do. And there's another body of research on flexible persistence, which I call the joy choice, that is mounting, that shows that flexible persistence towards behaviors, especially in the health behavior realm, is a better strategy than trying to do the same thing in the same way. So we know that there's data suggesting that flexible responses is optimal. And we know that habit formation is untenable for most things, but that planning is helpful. So here's what I think is the secret sauce. You plan what your exercise or what you're going to do, but you also realize that life is always going to send curveballs when you least expect it. So be ready to pivot and pick an alternative, whether it's time, place, duration, everything. I'm going to stop there because I know I stopped you from asking me a really important question.
Well, you mentioned the term disruption there, and I wanted to ask you about that trifecta of decision disruptors that you outline in the book. You're talking about things like rebellion, accommodation, and perfection. Can you talk me through these?
Sure. So, I've been coaching people too for decades. So that's my research is very much grounded by the realities of real people. That's what I did before I became a researcher. I coached people in my method to solve the problem that I told you about at the beginning, and then I decided to become a researcher. So everything I do is grounded in how real people actually, what happens at a decision point, at a challenging point. So we can, as long as everything's going according to plan, we don't have to think very much about it. But because we've already established things don't go according to plan most of the time, the smartest thing we can do is figure out what is going to get at our way at those things that I call choice points, these points when our health related plans have been disrupted for whatever reason. Though I call them traps, I call them our decision traps. The first one is temptation, the T in trap. And temptation is very straightforward. It's, I want that chocolate cake, calling my name over there at the party, or I'd rather watch Friday Night Lights on Netflix than, go to the gym and do the Stairmaster that I don't like doing. So we feel this temptation to do something. And we know from the most recent theories of exercise and healthy eating that have to do with the brain is that our brain has absorbed all of our experiences. And when we're at these decision points, it brings forth even unconsciously our experience. So when we are at this point of, I want to watch Netflix versus I should go to exercise, but I really don't want to, those tempting situations often derail people's decision to go exercise. And so simply by knowing that and being able to point to it and be aware of it, that helps reduce the pull of temptation. The second decision trap is the R, which is rebellion. And that is so common. It's when people want to rebel, like, they went on a diet because their clinician said they need to lose weight, or they're trying to lose weight, but they really resent the diet. They resent what the food they're supposed to be eating. So they're like, screw you, food, I'm going to eat this. Or screw you, exercise, I don't want to do you. I don't want to, even though everyone's doing it and they seem like it's a good thing, I said I was going to do it. So we rebel against the very thing that we said we wanted, but deep down we have a lot of conflict with. So again, understanding how this phenomenon works, and as we notice it, we gain more control over that. The third trap is a little different. The A in trap refers to the word accommodation. And accommodation is, I struggled with what to call this phenomenon. Originally, and I often don't talk about this, I originally was thinking about whether I should call it altruism, but altruism is such a positive force that I thought I can't call something negative altruism. So the word is accommodation. And that's when we accommodate everyone and everything else consistently to the exclusion of our own exercise or healthy eating goals. So I say consistently because we always have to accommodate our needs to other people. That's what being in a relationship means. That's what being a community member means. That's what a good person does. Accommodation refers to a consistent pattern of always foregoing your exercise needs, your healthy eating needs, because you want to please other people. And then the fourth trap, or the P in trap, is perfection. And this refers to this, it's when we are perfectionistic about our plans and goals. And it gets to something we've already really talked about, which is, people come to their decision point. I said I was going to go to the gym for 60 minutes. I only have 13 minutes right now. I'm not going to do anything. It's not worth it. I said I was going to stick to my diet at this place, and, you could just, I can't, there's so much good stuff here. Often people just go hog wild, when there's compromise in there. They could say, you know what? I do want to eat that hamburger or whatever it is, or cake, but instead of the whole piece or two pieces, I'm going to eat a half of it. So perfectionism, all or nothing thinking, is what almost is probably the biggest derailer. And it's because of how we've been taught to approach exercise and healthy eating in very prescriptive ways. And so if we don't follow the prescription, we're not doing it right. But the reality of consistent and sustainable behavior couldn't be farther from the truth for most people. Not everyone. There are people like my husband and maybe you who are going to always do it perfectly to the T, but most of us just can't. And so that formula sets the vast majority of the population up for failure. So that's why I wrote The Joy Choice. The antidote to all or nothing thinking is that something is better than nothing, or the perfect and perfect option. So when you only have 13 minutes, it's fantastic to go and just walk around your house or walk outside for 13 minutes and know that that is a success. It's not a failure of not achieving the 60 minutes.
And is that why then that you don't like the term accountability?
Yes. Oh, did you read my post about that? Yes, because accountability, again, nothing is true for everyone. So I always want to say that accountability as a concept and strategy may work for some people. The problem with the term accountability is it essentially implies that you don't have the internal motivation to do it yourself, and it creates a controlled sense of obligation, which we know from a motivation perspective is contaminates our motivation. So yes, that's why I don't like account. That's why I don't think that is a very helpful term for most people.
And of course, it brings up that ogre of guilt too, which is corrosive and self-destructive.
Yes.
Now, can we talk about, with people listening to this in mind in January when they're talking and thinking about making behavior change and adopting new habits, etc., can we talk about harnessing identity to cultivate consistently healthy choices?
Can you say I didn't hear the first part of what you were asking.
So when I'm talking to you now, I'm thinking that people are going to be listening to this at the beginning of the new year when they're
Yes.
thinking about adopting new behaviors and changing old behaviors and new habits, etc. So can we talk about harnessing identity in order to
Sure.
cultivate consistently healthy choices? Yeah.
Sure. Sure. And, that is certainly the way that I would talk about it, in an academic point of view. So let's first unpack what identity means a little bit, right? So when we think about our identity and why that's such a powerful motivational force, which the emerging research really does suggest that if we can help internalize the behavior as a part of our identity, that's a very compelling motivator for consistent decision making. So what is our identity? It's who I am. It's the things that I care about. It's my values. It's it is the things that are most important to me. So if we can help people understand, again, if exercise is medicine, it's not our identity, right? I mean, you can see the difference. If exercise is going to help, if I think that I'm going to get on a scale when I exercise and see the numbers drop, that's not identity. So when we talk about integrating exercise as a part of our identity, what we're talking about is helping. I'll talk in terms of helping your audience. I would want to help you understand the very concrete ways in which moving your body regularly, let's not even call it exercise, will help you feel and be your best. And when you feel and be your best, then you do everything you care about better. You have more energy for your family, you have more enthusiasm for your work, and all of those things. You have more ability to connect with other people, another motivator that is very powerful, and also health promoting behavior. We know connecting with others is this tremendously physiologically and psychologically valuable thing we can do. So if movement or exercise helps us achieve all those things, then it has become a part of our identity, because we recognize that when we do it, we benefit in those ways. And we also, this is an important part of the learning process. We learn that when we don't move and we stay sitting for days, we don't get those benefits anymore. So that's how I would try to help. That's how I help my clients try to learn how to make exercise a really positive and motivating part of their identity.
I'm glad you mentioned the term motivation there, because I wanted to make reference to it. I know you wrote a previous book which deals with the science of motivation. It's called No Sweat, which I will link in the show notes of this episode too. Motivation is never a problem for me. Certainly when it comes to physical exercise, I engage in the sport of triathlon. I really enjoy it. So could you, for the benefit of our listeners, could you tell us what secrets you can dispense about how to harness motivation if it doesn't come naturally for you?
Yes, your questions are so good. They really lend themselves to talking about these nuanced topics. So motivation is this term that's thrown all over society. I'm not motivated. I'm motivated. Get motivated. Motivation is really just drive and desire. So do you feel desire to do something, or do you not have desire to do something? So if we even walk away from motivation, we can better understand the phenomenon that we're trying to do. Well, in the method that I developed, and again, this was all in the 90s to solve the problem that I discovered in my kinesiology master's thesis, was how to help people stay motivated for life. And so I studied the problem for many years, and I worked for people for many years, decades. And here's there's a formula. I'm going to tell you what the formula is. The foundation of motivation is your primary why for starting to exercise. So, and when I say why, I'm talking about your primary reason, your primary goal or objective. So there are some right whys and wrong whys. And before I explain those things, I want to just say this caveat again. Nothing is true for everyone. And wrong whys do work for some people. So that's the caveat. I have categorized these certain goals for exercising as wrong and right whys from what the literature has shown in terms of their motivational potential, what the literature has shown in terms of how they make people feel about exercising, what the literature has shown about their ability to produce sustainable physical activity, and what my own coaching with people has shown about them. And I don't know if I have any of these graphics online. I probably don't anymore, but there's something called the vicious cycle of failure, which starts with the wrong whys. And so the wrong whys make exercise feel like a chore from the get-go. So the wrong whys, in my definition, tend to be trying to lose weight through exercise, trying to quote unquote get fit through exercise, trying to avoid some dreaded disease in 20 years, like, that you might be at risk for. And in theory, all of those whys or reasons for exercising are important and logical and valid. The problem is, if they're going to set you up to fail before you step out the door, that's why they're the wrong why. So they motivate most people to start, but they keep people stuck in starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And they always keep cycling through the vicious cycle of failure, because the cycle starts with the wrong whys, and we're always in search of the next wrong whys. In contrast to these future logical shame-based reasons for exercising, there are what I call the right whys. And the right whys, science shows, are immediately feeling better while you're exercising. So it's lifted mood, it's more energy, it's having fun with people, it's connecting with people. And what these whys do for exercise is, instead of making exercise a chore, it turns it into a gift, because these are experiences that you want to have, and it helps you to keep going, because every time you do them, you get the reinforcing gift experience. So getting back to your original question, if you want to create lasting motivation, you have to understand whether you have the wrong why, whether you've been kind of plagued with choosing the wrong whys all the time. And if so, really come to terms with whether they keep you motivated over time or don't. For most people, the answer is they don't. And then you can get into a process of discovery and learning through, well, I want to exercise. What do I want to get from it that's going to help me stay motivated so I can keep taking care of myself?
And how closely linked are those good whys to positive emotions like the joy, which is in the title of your book?
Yeah, well, the right whys cultivate positive emotions. And the neuroscience of reward shows us that when we have a positive experience, we learn to like it, as long as there's not any other complicating factors that are getting in the way. And then we learn to want it. And so really what the right whys are trying to do is to wire our brains to want to exercise. And the wrong whys just are really poor at that.
And is this significance of emotion and positive emotion? Is this part of the reason then why you decided to call your book The Joy Choice in that case?
No. Good question. Let me explain why I called the second book The Joy Choice. So, as part, I wear a lot of hats. And one of my hats as a practitioner since the 90s has been as a marketer and a brander, because I have a coaching practice. So I have to market my services, or at least I did, a lot in a past phase of my life. So what do you learn? What does branding do? Branding is a process by which people develop positive associations, where a company tries to create purposeful positive associations between the product, service, or decision that they want consumers to make. And so the joy choice does not refer to feeling better from your decision. The joy choice, I have branded the perfect and perfect option, that 13-minute walk when you can't go to the gym for 60 minutes, that half of a cake, instead of either sticking 100% to your diet and feeling miserable at the whole party or going hog wild. The joy choice is the perfect and perfect option that lets us do something. So that's kind of a mouthful. The perfect and perfect option that lets us do something instead of nothing and be successful and continuously fuel ourselves. It's the joy choice, because it lets us make that decision that helps us fulfill our identity through doing something that is going to benefit us, instead of choosing to do nothing.
Well, that's a great answer, and certainly it alludes perfectly to your second book, as you said, The Joy Choice, No Sweat, your previous book. Two great reads. If people want to find out more about you and about your work, where can they go, Doctor?
Sure. Well, thank you. They can go to my website, which is michellesegar.com. You'll have, I'm sure, a link to it
Sure.
in your show notes. And I want people to know a couple of things. There are quizzes for
Yeah,
both of the books.
that's right.
So if either the topic of exercise motivation is really interesting to you and you want to see how you score on the quiz, that would be a good quiz to take. Or if the idea of learning more about, at the point of decision for healthy eating or exercise, what tends to derail and how you can overcome them, there's a quiz that helps you understand which of the traps might plague you most and how to overcome them. And while this hasn't really been announced yet, I'm going to be launching a certification program to help professionals learn how to use my lasting motivation method with their clients and patients. So while there's no information on my website about that, if people are interested, they should definitely send me an email through the website. And I have a newsletter where about once a month I send out information about a new research study and what I think about it and how people can use the research in their own lives.
And if people look closely at the shelves behind you, they can see both your books on the
Oh,
shelves there as well. So it'll give them a sense of what the actual books look like. Well, Dr. Segar, I could talk to you all evening, but our time is running short now. So might I thank you for joining me on the podcast today. And as I said, I'll pop a link to your website and your books in the show notes for this episode.
thank you so much. It was such a joy.